Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Success School podcast. I just want to say thank you so much for being here and taking time to listen to the show today. And I also just want to make sure you are aware that my whole mission with this podcast is to be able to give people access to conversations that are going to enlighten, they're going to inspire, and they're going to give you the information needed to genuinely start to live a happier, a healthier, and a more fulfilling life. But here's the thing, I am just one man. So that's really, really hard to get a lot of people to be positively impacted when I'm doing this alone. So I'm just going to ask a little favor. And I know you're probably sick of hearing this. You probably hear it on every podcast you listen to. But please, if you genuinely do think this podcast is valuable and can help people, if you could just take a second to hit that subscribe button and maybe go one further, tell other people about it, share it on your Insta stories, anything you can do to help bring more awareness to the show would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for being here, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, Michaela. It's so lovely to have you on the show. I wondered if you could just start by explaining to the listeners exactly who you are, what you do, and just tell us a little bit about that journey, really, behind what led you to do what you do.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's so lovely to meet everyone who's live on the call as well. So I'm Michaela Thomas. I'm a clinical psychologist. I am an author. I'm a coach. I'm a therapist. I am a mother. I'm a business owner. I am a lot of different things. I am ADHD. So that means that this conversation today, hopefully Matt will structure it, but I often go off on tangents with storytelling. So I am multi-passionate. I have a lot of different strands to my business. I started my journey working in the NHS in Sweden, and then I moved to the UK, so the equivalent of the NHS. And I worked in 2 different services in London, and there was such a fast-paced kind of service where you were having under huge demands and pressures. And for the kind of brain that I had a real passion to help everyone and try to do as much as I could. For me, that's success. Actually, having the best recovery rates in the service I worked in meant that I burnt out, right? So then at that time, kind of perfectionistic traits meant that I was really vulnerable for people pleasing. And I was frequently told, Michaela does not need to be managed. Michaela manages herself. And that cost me burnout. So that's why I do a lot of work around ADHD, perfectionism, and burnout, and how they all overlap, and that you're not having to pay that price for success. So now I work in my own company, and I've been doing that for 10 years. And I support female entrepreneurs, often with ADHD, often women who've experienced burnout or they're flirting with it, juggling their kids who might be neurodivergent as well with their businesses, and just trying to be successful without paying the price of their sanity. That's kind of what I do.
Wow, pretty important stuff then. Let's be honest. I think it's much needed. And I think there's so much in there that I want to ask more about, because I'm sure that, there'll be many people listening that resonate with different themes and different things you've touched upon there. I'm interested in if we could start with maybe the ADHD for you personally, in terms of what have been some of the traits and the challenges with ADHD, and how do you navigate and manage those kind of challenges?
Well, one of them I've kind of touched upon is the overworking and risk of burnout. So the boom and bust patterns that we also talk about. Sort of you go because you've got an idea or you've got a brainwave, and you've finally dropped into a hyper focus, where hyper focus is essentially having tunnel vision on the one thing that you really want to get done. And then it might be that you're ignoring your body signals that you need rest, that you need sleep, that you need to eat. All of these interoceptive cues from your body can be really hard for neurodivergent people to pay attention to. So then you keep going and your body kind of goes, no, done. And you go into the bust, where you then crash, and you might slump into procrastination or outright burnout, where you then can't get anything done. And those kind of uneven patterns of productivity was a real challenge for me and for all the clients I support. I just couldn't do the 9 to 5 work week in a very sort of like linear fashion. Hence why entrepreneurship is just the way to go for me.
So when you say they're the body signals, and then obviously not get into a place where you've ignored them for so long that you get burnout, can you just, if someone's hearing that and they're uncertain, because I think there's often a narrative in people's head about, well, am I just being lazy and is that why I'm procrastinating, or is it actually no, my body's trying to say we're doing too much, we need to stop? Can you give any advice around that, about what are the clear signals and what we can do about it?
Well, it's important to acknowledge that not everyone who procrastinates is ADHD, and not everyone who procrastinates is a perfectionist, but there are strong links between those. So a lot of perfectionists procrastinate, and a lot of procrastinators are perfectionists,
Right.
but not everyone. It's not a causality link, and it's really important to say that, because we see a lot of social media content that says if you do this toxic trait, then you are ADHD, and there's a lot more nuance to it than that. So we have to first be curious about why is it that you procrastinate. And the first thing to do is then to start tracking, start to look for patterns. In what part of the work week do you procrastinate the most? In what part of the day do you procrastinate? Is there a natural slump in your energy that makes you kind of go, ugh? Is it in the mornings? Is it in the after lunch? Is it in the evenings? And when do you then actually ignore and disregard your body's natural sign that you've had enough, that you've peaked, to use kind of a PT language, and just ignoring it and pushing through anyway? That's a really good sign that you might be then long term repeatedly doing that, heading towards burnout, if you ignore your body signs that you need to slow down. And procrastination is a great indicator that something needs to shift in your energy. That's often where I suggest people take a movement break, move up their space. If you're sort of sitting in front of your computer screen and you're like, can't get anything done, either you need to go up or down in your energy. And which one you need to go to can be hard to tell, right? So is it okay if I kind of go into that a bit? Because it's to do with how we regulate our nervous system.
That would be amazing, yeah.
So upregulating is essentially when we get more sparks of energy. And as ADHDers, well, most people need this, but ADHDers is even more important, because when we don't have enough dopamine, it's like, I don't fire all those cylinders. Then doing something like moving your body to some dance music, or going out for a quick walk, or shaking your body like this, for anyone who's watching live, just flinging your limbs around, can get that little spark of reigniting yourself. Because basically you slump because you're not stimulated enough in your brain. This is what stimulant medication obviously does. It's like giving that ignition back again. So if you feel that you need to go up because you don't want to do the thing that you're supposed to be doing, like tidying up your wardrobe or writing that email you don't want to do, can you then upregulate to kind of get yourself into gear? Sometimes people upregulate too much, too often, and that means that they're actually burning through all the cylinders. Like, oh, just gonna go. I need to go and do a HIIT class to like smash it out, and that kind of language. If that's you all the time, you probably need to go down instead. So down regulation can be stuff like sitting down and just taking 6 slow, deep breaths in a minute, staring out through the window, just going for a random walk, staring at a tree, literally where you can feel your shoulders are literally dropping. And that could be, restorative yoga. It can be meditating, talking to a friend, sitting still with a cup of tea and just breathing in the scent of it. Like, it does not achieve anything particular. There's no result. You're just being in that moment.
What if people are hearing that and they don't know how to identify which it is they need? Because perhaps if we're talking about someone who's super ambitious, they've maybe got a really exciting idea that they're super focused on, they're seeing progress, but they don't know actually, am I doing too much or not enough? Like, have you any guidance on that, how to recognize that?
Sure do. Trial and error. Literally, you have to be a work in progress. You have to allow yourself to experiment with this. Sometimes it's kind of referred to as the eternal student, like the mind of the eternal student, or a beginner's mind. You're like, curiosity. I wonder what happens if I go to 5 HIIT classes this week. How will I feel at the end of it? Versus if I go to 2 HIIT classes and 2 yoga sessions, how will I feel then? And I'm saying that rather flippantly, but it's because it takes a bit of pressure off for us to have just nailed this and like, this is the thing I will do in my morning routine. All of those things we see are formulaic and not based on you as an individual with your unique fluctuating needs in every moment of every day. Especially speaking to a lot of women here, we have cyclical fluctuations, and all of us have cyclical fluctuations across the day. So that can't be a blanket rule. It can't be do this up thing when you're feeling X, do this down thing when you're feeling Y, because that's my whole job as a psychologist. This is why I trained for like 10 years, is because there is no quick blanket rule. It is what works for me, what serves my best function for me, what gives me the best consequences. And it's a trial and success, I should say, rather than trial and error.
And I guess as well, it's an evolving thing because as we grow as people, as we have different wants and needs, different life experiences, what was working might not be working. And I love that what you said about it's constant curiosity. And sort of something that springs to my mind is it's this idea of almost like a self-awareness muscle that we have to keep training, that keep just being in tune. Is something off? Do I need to then ask better questions and reflect and that kind of thing, right?
Very much this is an ongoing practice, and that's why I think of it as a practice rather than something that I have just done. So these are sort of sets of habits that you do, and as any human we will drift away from them, we will forget the healthy habits, but ADHDers are even more so. And one of the biggest things I see when I work with female entrepreneurs is they kind of go, I know I should be doing these things, why don't I do it? It's because you're ADHD. And that means we have to repeat these lessons. It's almost like I run a podcast. For 4 years, I've talked about things that I just need to hear. Essentially, I talk about it as a lesson to myself. And that's why I'm, even saying it out loud to you. We know that actually saying things out loud or putting them down on paper, writing it, that helps to cement the message to ourselves. So these are things we constantly need to be told and constantly need to hear, that it's okay to take a break, or it's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to kind of think, oh, I needed to upregulate, and I went to a dance class and that made me feel anxious. Maybe I now need to go down a bit. Maybe I don't need to have a coffee today. Like, it's okay to not have all of it figured out and just keep tweaking, tweaking, tweaking.
I love it. And I guess as well, that's where journaling can be really powerful for some people, right? Because they're just constantly asking those questions, they're reflecting. Or if journaling doesn't work, maybe like we've done, just start a podcast because it forces you to talk about them. And like you say, as much as it's giving value and serving other people, it actually helps to keep repeating those lessons. What about perfectionism, which is another part of what you've mentioned there that you speak about and so on? And I think perfectionism, a lot of people on the surface think, well, that sounds great. You're a high achieving, ambitious person and it has to be perfect. What's your thoughts? Is perfectionism good? Is it bad? Is it neither?
I'm going to give you the classic psychologist answer, which is it depends.
Of course, of
It's a
course.
sort of, because it's, of course, because it's nuance, but perfectionism is like the favorite flaw that we all like to say in a job interview. Like, oh, so what kind of challenges have you got, or any flaws? Oh, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. That's
Like a
not a
badge
good
of
thing.
honor, isn't it? It's like we're going, oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I will, I'll work really hard. And that, you think that perfectionist means that you will bring with you, say, things like conscientiousness, high work ethic, high performance. And yes, it can. But I would like to encourage people to think of striving for excellence rather than striving for perfection. So think of book writing as an example, right? If I'd been allowed to release the first draft of my book, it wouldn't have been very readable. There's like 16 versions of edited drafts of my book, etc., right? Because we keep tweaking it, you keep changing words, etc. That's not perfecting it, because it can never be perfect. If I was going to perfect my book, it would never have seen the light of day, right? So that's the bit that we really have to think about, how striving for excellence helps us to actually achieve things and get them over the finish line. That's why we have cliches like better done than perfect. Whereas perfectionism is crippling our productivity and crippling our success. And even if you were getting things done thanks to your perfectionism, that means you still don't have any joy or sense of achievement from it. So when you have done this big stretchy thing that you've been working your ass off for, then you're like, next, what's next? And you come to the end of that mountain you've climbed, and rather than standing there to kind of go, wow, look at this view, look at what I've done. I just wrote a book or won an award or released a podcast. If you don't take any sense of stillness and savoring that success you just had and just go, right, okay, next, move on to next goal, you will literally be robbing yourself of all the joy.
Mm. And you just mentioned there about your book, The Lasting Connection, which is your book that, I mean, I'd just love to hear a little bit about what that book is, why you wrote it. And I know there's the pause purpose play method that you talk about, and that's also the name of your podcast, right? Would you just share with our listeners a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So the lasting connection is about how you develop love and compassion, not just for your partner, but also for yourself. So we have a lot of exercises in identifying your inner critical voice, because that makes it really hard for you to connect more deeply with another person. If you don't like yourself, how are you going to let someone else in to like and love you? So there's a lot of bits around forgiveness and compassionate communication, curiosity, like I mentioned, but also really remembering that compassion is a really strong, brave choice, because when we are compassionate with others or compassionate with ourselves, we need to actually take a moment of going, this is really painful. That thing you just said to me now, that's really hard to hear. So I have to ground myself so that I'm able to hold the thing you just shared. And that takes a lot of strength. So in the book, we work on how we develop that almost like mental strength through mindfulness, through communication practices, behavioral activation, to just make yourself a little bit more sturdy, to big yourself up when other people don't. And that means that when you act as if you have self-worth, as if you are worth being compassionate to, other people start to treat you accordingly. So it's that kind of sense of turning it inwards, treating yourself as you would treat your best friends. And that then translates out into love as well. You'll start to make better choices. You'll start to act differently in your relationship. And essentially, the pause, purpose, play framework is kind of going through that. So I want to explain what I mean with those three things. That's kind of like, I like P words. They're memorable, alliterations, right? So pause is a way to just say, to become aware. So we can pause for long enough to notice. Like I'm noticing right now that I'm speaking quite fast and I'm trying to take some deep breaths to slow it because my mind is like vibing with yours, right? So I'm pausing for long enough to notice that. And then I'm connecting it to purpose. Who do I want to be in this moment on this podcast? How do I want to come across? What are my values? What's meaningful to me? So for me, I want to think about conveying psychology messages, right? So that disseminating psychology might be a guiding light there or a compass. So you think about then connecting with your purpose, your why. Why am I on this conversation talking to Matt and these people I've never met? That's actually really important to me because that makes me connect with what do you all need to know? And how can I be really present with that? And lastly, play. That's the bit that I mentioned, the joy, the fun, the spontaneity, the flexibility, the letting go of some rigid kind of rules and musts that we all have. I'm in my 40s, so I've come to my effort 40s, and I can give myself the permission to do a lot more stuff, be a lot more free, unmasking my ADHD, and I can play and have fun and be curious with that. So that's the pause, purpose, play. You can use that framework in anything from business to love.
I absolutely love that. Well, and it's so simplistic, it's so easy to remember, and so useful, I guess. I want to go a bit further on the word purpose, and the reason being, I think it gets used a lot in marketing around self-development and success, and there's this whole thing of find your passion, find your purpose, and you'll be successful. And I think it leaves a lot of people going, I don't know that I've got this big huge life purpose, and if I don't have that, is there something wrong with me? Will I never be successful and happy? I just wondered on your thoughts on that, and helping people with the subject of having a purpose.
I love that. And that sense of trying to connect purpose with success, because what's success for one person is not success for another person. And when I think about purpose, I always go in the back end of regret. So if you come to your 80th birthday and you stand in a room with your loved ones, this is kind of a story we often use in acceptance and commitment therapy. If you come to your 80th birthday party surrounded by loved ones, friends, and family, what would you want people to say about you? How would you want people to remember you, talk about you? What would you want your children to say to you, that they're so thankful for all the things you've given them? Is that sort of the financial riches you left behind, or is it the life lessons you've left behind? Is it the love, the connection? Is, thank you so much for always being there for me. What is it that you want to leave behind as a legacy? That's got nothing to do with the success we do at work. Really nothing. It's more about what is it that I don't want to regret when I'm on my deathbed, It's a really interesting study by a palliative care nurse who looked at that. She asked people what their biggest regret was at the end of life. And you kind of think, oh, maybe I've worked too much or didn't spend enough time with my loved ones. But the biggest regret people had was something along the lines of not living a life that they felt was authentic to them, but living a life that was expected of them.
Man, that makes me feel so sad.
Mm.
I think that's so sad just to think that that would be how. And I guess it makes me feel so sad because I feel like what you're describing is potentially on some level what most people are living, right? Is this expectation of what they should be doing, or I can't do that because I'll be judged, and fearing those kind of things. And then
Mm.
and then that comes out to be the biggest thing you regret, right?
Yeah,
Potentially.
because you're not lived a free life. You've not lived a life that you wanted to live that was meaningful to you. And I think I want to come back to what you said about success, that, if I look at what I've done over the last few years, like I released a book that became a bestseller. I have an award-winning podcast. I run a successful private practice. This year, I won the Inspirational Modern Woman of the Year award, and I stepped up on that stage wearing a rainbow dress in a room where everyone else was wearing really bloody expensive evening gowns, and I'm like, oh, hello, I do not fit in here. And that was fine. I was like, that's what I'm meant to do. I'm supposed to be a little bit extra and a little bit different. And I got on that stage, and the feeling, the rush of winning an award, that lasted for a little while. That was a big rush of dopamine that evening. I was felt proud for a few weeks, but that's not what I think of as success. The richness to me in that moment is stepping up on that stage and taking my 3 minutes I had to say, out of all of you in this room tonight, 25% of you will struggle with mental health. Go and talk to someone. That's literally what I took that moment to do. That to me is success.
I think on that, I'd love to dive a bit deeper into just general myths around success. And also, I don't know what you think about this concept, but I heard this concept a few years ago about like ambition. And for most people, we talk about inner peace and loving yourself. And, then people think, well, actually, that's going to stop me being ambitious, because if it's about being so in the present and so happy with what I am and who I am, why would I strive for more? And I love this concept, which I have come to really take on board, and I think I feel it, which is you're ambitious because of gratitude, because you're grateful that you're here, that you have the opportunity to do cool stuff and enjoy the journey and learn stuff. And that can be the fuel to ambition, not the feeling of not being enough or needing acceptance or needing more money because it'll complete whatever that thing is, or a fit body. So I just wondered your thoughts on that, the idea of ambition and success and the myths and the confusion around it in your experience.
I love that question because it comes up a lot in my community of people who are very sort of into high performance, who have a real strong fear that if I start to be kinder to myself, I won't be as productive and then I won't get stuff done. And I've been asked this time and time again on podcasts, and when I do corporate talks to people who are very, very successful, when I speak to founders trying to prevent burnout, like all of the same questions are coming around. If I am kinder to myself, I just will not get the stuff done, right? Then I won't be as productive. And if I'm not working as hard, then I won't get to the places I want to, right? So I think it might be helpful to be aware of 3 emotional systems in your brain, right? So we tend to sort of symbolize them with circles, not because you have 3 balls in your brain, but because for simplicity's sake, right? So we have one circle, which is the red one, which is your threat system. Your threat system, we all need it for survival. We need to have that to be aware of danger. Otherwise, you would just cross the street and be run over, right? The threat system gives us things like cortisol and adrenaline, the stress hormones, that kind of mobilizes us to do things, to deal with danger, right? And then we have the drive system, which is the thing that gives us a sense of vitality, joy, excitement, a bubbly dopamine feeling of getting stuff done and I'm being really productive, right? Too much of that and you might go manic, not enough of that system and you will be depressed, right? So this is why actually procrastination is a very important thing to me to look at more deeply, because it could also be masking depression underneath that. That's a side point. The third system is the soothing system, right? This is where we kind of go, I feel just at ease. I feel kind of nice. Nothing big spectacular happening. I'm just cuddling on the sofa, giving my kid a hug, whatever it is. It's just, just being, sandy toes on a beach somewhere and the sun is on your hair. That kind of feeling of calm and connected, rest and digest, right? So now let's think about these three areas, the red, the blue, and the green. Often what we see is when people think they are in their drive system, getting a bunch of stuff done, being really productive, in ambition, right? They're actually driven by threat. They're not driven by vitality and joy and excitement. They're driven by fear of failure, driven by fear of ridicule, fear of money running out if you run a business. And that's a really frantic, contracted energy rather than the expansive energy you have when you're truly in your drive system, when you create from a place of joy.
So the lesson there is an awareness thing, I guess, as well, which is about connecting more with the blue and the green and recognizing that that is a more wholesome, better way to be operating from, right?
Yeah. And that's also the full on permission for doing the things that are in the green, which is taking a moment to just be, because the green, the soothing, that's oxytocin. That's the kind of love and cuddle hormone that we have. That actually soothes cortisol. That eases the threat. So if you feel full on and it's too much, going out and just sit in your garden and just go, stare up into the trees for a bit. And then or go and stroke your cat or your dog. That kind of thing. I mean, there's some dog owners nodding along here. They give us huge amounts of oxytocin. Go and cuddle a stuffed toy if you don't have a dog. There are some elements of research saying that gives oxytocin too. Go and have a warm shower, a warm bath. Go and have an orgasm. Like, do the things that feel kind of nice, right? That means you're soothing your stress levels, and then you can enter your drive system again to be productive, to do the stuff you have ambitiously set out to do. So you will reach your stretchy goals without becoming overstretched.
I think there's definitely something a bit weird about me because I've been reflecting on this recently. I don't think there's many things that make me as happy as stroking my cat. That's not normal, is it? I literally get so
Very
much
normal.
joy from my cat. It's weird. But yeah, I guess there's the reason cat videos go viral, right? There must be other people that are weird just like me.
I like raccoon videos, so that's fine.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
That's very normal. Interesting side fact is that the cat will not get the same joy out of you stroking it as a dog would. Cats get less oxytocin productivity compared to dogs. But that's just why we love them even more, right?
I don't want to know that now. It makes me feel upset that it's not reciprocated. But anyway, we'll move
It's
past.
reciprocated, just not as much as the dog. But that's the kind of pet you got, right? And fiercely
Yeah.
independent little creature.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd love to talk as well because I know this is a big subject for a lot of people, which is when they are working on themselves and maybe listening to conversations like this and getting clarity over what they want from their life and what's going to serve them better. A lot of people would identify with being what we consider a people pleaser. And with that, they find it so difficult to set boundaries, to communicate their needs effectively, and ultimately say no. How would you help somebody if that resonates and they know they're taking on too much because they're scared to let others down? And they also now are hearing, I need to get better at this. What would you say?
I mean, in the ideal world, I would wish and want it to be enough to just say you deserve better. But a lot of people are not ready to be coming at it from that angle. So I always go in from the other angle, that if you really care deeply about other people, you don't want to let them down, and you're therefore a people pleaser, actually realizing that in the long term, you will let them down because you will overpromise and underdeliver, and you'll become resentful about it. So if you actually value this relationship and you value this person, you need to practice on setting some boundaries. Otherwise, you will tarnish this relationship with your own bitterness. That you will keep giving and giving and it's not getting reciprocated. A lot of people pleasers don't even give the other person a chance to reciprocate it because they're also dodging any compassion flowing in from others. Like, sort of classic thing, you're sitting in the office and people go like, do you want a cup of tea? You're like, no, I'm fine. I'll make my own cup of tea. So it's practicing receiving is a really important part. If you don't have the awareness that you do this, you're basically blocking someone else from being kind to you. And then you will never have that kind of equilibrium in your relationships, and you will feel resentful. This
And
happens
also
both
for
in romantic relationships and work relationships, and between your kids and yourself even.
yeah, and a thought that I just had when you said that example, even just with the, making a cup of tea or whatever, is as humans, we do like to be able to give and do good for others. Like
Yeah.
I've heard a phrase, is it the art of living is giving? Like there's a really nice
Mm.
feeling about that. So actually, you're robbing them of the opportunity to feel good as well. And I guess there's cliche sayings about, you have to be selfish to be selfless. And I think there is some truth in that. As when you're filling up your own cup and you're being the best version of you, you can be even more to others and serve them better, right?
Yeah. I think of it as protecting your capacity. Like you talk about filling up the cup, but thinking about a battery can be more helpful, that you wouldn't let your phone drain to 0% and not charge it. Well, you might do if you're ADHD and have to carry a
Yeah.
battery pack like I do. But you wouldn't necessarily do that. You'd be like, oh, it's running a bit low. Let's plug it in so it can function properly. But if you let yourself run down to that, I have that awareness that when I'm down to my 10, 20%, I'm not the version of myself that I want to be with my kids. And as I have neurodivergent kids, I have to really top myself up to be one step ahead of when the next meltdown is going to come. I really have a responsibility towards my children to keep myself well as I possibly can, so I can be the kind of mother they need. Um, that's the way I think of it as well. I protect my capacity so I can protect this relationship.
So talk about relationships, because I know you said as well that's a big part of what the book is about, both the relationship with oneself and with others. I'm in a new relationship right now, so I am all ears. I need to make sure that I'm really tuned into this part. I'm just wondering, from your experience, what are you seeing are themes in current challenges that people are finding in relationships? What are the things that are meaning relationships are not working out? And what's some advice so that we can all be having, hopefully, loving, fulfilling, and ideally lasting relationships? Because I'm done with heartbreak. It's tiring. It's exhausting. I don't want any more. What would you say to me?
Oh, yeah, I did see that when I was doing a quick little deep dive into your Instagram of seeing your former heartbreak, and it's hard. It is really hard. It's a grief. It's a loss of a life that we had and a life that could have been. So of course we know that loss of relationships is one of the biggest life stresses in life. Divorce is right up there with losing a loved one to death. So one of the things I would say is I've noticed has become increasingly challenging for couples is that, again, pressure of perfection, that people have really high expectations of how their partner has to meet all of their needs and be everything to them in a way that we see on social media or in films. Rom-coms have a lot to answer for, because they don't portray reality, that humanity means we have suffering and we hurt and things are stressful. So I think of connection as a lasting one. It's like kind of like a waxing and waning. So you will naturally have things in life that where you drift apart a bit, like becoming parents is the hugest trigger for that. And then you have to really consciously notice, like, oh, we're now disconnecting somewhat, we're drifting apart somewhat because something has come between us. How do we think about bringing that back together again, rather than you are the problem or you are the problem? It's like, how do we together face this
Mm.
problem?
Like we're a
And that
team that have
togetherness
the
is
same
important.
outcome, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So in your new relationship, you're bound to have most of the fights you will have within the first 3 years. So just get them all out there. And the way you handle those fights, that is going to be a good predictor for how you'll navigate the next fight. So do have fights.
Mm.
I have real concerns with couples who tell me that they never argue, never fight, because
Mm.
that tells me that there's someone who's either going into a bit of a freeze state and never expressing their opinion, or people pleasing, or bending to the will of another, or they just don't have particularly rich exchanges, because they might then never talk about anything where you could potentially disagree and differ. Everything from, what's your favorite movie to where do you stand politically? Like, we're going to disagree, right? And I am more concerned about couples who say we never ever argue about anything than couples who say, yeah, we argue and then we repair and make up.
I think what I'm hearing is key is it's not the avoidance of argument, it's how you communicate through that. And that kind of made me think, I'm sure Holly wouldn't mind me kind of chatting about this because it's going to be useful to us. So selfishly, I'm going to ask this, but I also think there'll be other people this will apply to. So I'm being selfish and selfless, hopefully. So what I've noticed is a pattern when we have a disagreement or there's something we don't see eye to eye on, that she just doesn't want to talk about it. She wants to just process and sit with it. And then that I can feel in that moment like, I want to correct this. I want to help solve the problem. But in this moment, you don't want to speak to me, but I want to speak to you. And that can be the hard thing to navigate. And I think that like she's an amazing person. So we are navigating it brilliantly, but our gut instinct, if there is a clash, is almost polar opposites. One really wants to talk it out, which is obviously me. No, no, it's no surprises to anybody watching. I'm the one who wants to chat and chat and chat. Whereas she wants to go, I'll be fine, but I don't want to talk. And then I worry, and then I can feel insecure and worried that will she be fine? So I just wondered, have you any thoughts on navigating that dynamic?
Absolutely, such a common one. I'm smiling because that withdraw and demand pattern is very, very common. And it can be as physically obvious as one person following the other person around in the house, kind of like, talk to me. And the person who wants to withdraw as a way to regulate closes the door, and the person who pursues because they just want the answer, right? That's the way that they regulate because they just want to settle their anxiety by knowing. They might then come and like knock on the door. It might not be as obvious as that, but it might be much more like you can still see the withdraw and demand pattern between two partners who are just sitting next to each other on the sofa. You know, one person is like scanning the other person, like, what are you thinking? Say something. And the other one is literally just shut down. So I think about coming back to those three circles I mentioned about how we are in our nervous system. If you are actively in your threat system, you cannot solve problems, which you do in your drive system. Like, literally, those parts of your brain to do with problem solving, the unique human things we have that unfortunately, really sorry to say, your cat doesn't have, that is going to be switched off when you are having flooded kind of stress hormones around your brain. So the first thing we need to do is to soothe ourselves and knowing with wisdom, with awareness over time, what soothes your partner. I know my partner has a greater need for space and quiet. So I will tell him, go upstairs, put your headphones in, just lie in a dark room. I've got the kids if he needs to decompress. Whereas he knows I have a greater need for asking more questions, talking more, blah, 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 until the cows come home. And we know that after 10 years of marriage, we know what works for each of us. And that's where the dance begins. That's where the compromise comes in. Because if you always did what she wanted to do, despite it hurting what you want to do, that's a sacrifice. Right? A sacrifice is one that you feel that you cannot make willingly. I constantly do what you don't want to do. I bend over backwards and I don't ever get my needs met. That's not useful. A compromise is where both partners get their needs partially met. And that's where the dance begins. And you will get that wrong time and time again. Trust me, over 10 years of marriage, I have done plenty of times. But that's where repair comes in. Where you like afterwards, you can be curious. Like, actually, I kept following you when you didn't want to talk. And I was like, maybe if I could have just calmed myself to know that you would have been ready to talk in 20, 30 minutes. What do we do next time? Can we have some sort of like time out that you can signal to me that you just want some space? It's not that you hate my guts, or thinking about breaking up with me, you just want some space. So again, that's coming back to with curiosity, compassion and curiosity that didn't go the way we would have wanted to. What do we do next time?
Love that. And that is something that takes time to figure out. It's something, as you say, there needs to be curiosity. There needs to be a willingness to keep working at it. And also remove a need and an expectation, I guess, of perfection, because that's going to really screw you up again. It comes back to that, right? If you're like, oh, we're having an argument again, and maybe I'm not supposed to be with you. And actually that's, well, not necessarily true, right? And this is an ongoing... Love it. This is great.
Quick question. This is probably the most important question you will answer today. Have you got your tickets to our next event yet? Seriously, guys, I'm not just bigging this up because it's my event. Genuinely, this is gonna be one of the best events of 2025. Out of everything that I do, I can honestly say this is the thing I put the most energy, effort, attention into, and it's one of the things I enjoy the most. It's going to be a day jam-packed with incredible speakers talking about business, mindset, sales, and marketing. And not only is there going to be some incredible speakers, but this is going to be a room filled with people who are committed to being the best version of themselves, which I would say is going to be quite a good room to be in if you want to achieve more in your life. So if you haven't already, make sure you click the link in the show notes, get your tickets, and I'll be so excited to see you there on Sunday, the 2nd of February. Get your tickets. Have you got them yet? Right. We'll get back to the episode.
I want to be mindful of time, and I want to make sure we've got time for some Q&A with our amazing members that are here live. So I'm going to head over to some of the general life questions that I try and ask all guests on this show. So the first one is, what is some of the best advice you've received and why?
Some of the best advice I received, this actually came from my dad many years ago, and I wouldn't quote him and a lot of other things, but he once said, when I was upset about something, he said, fall apart and then move on. You know, it was said in Swedish, so it doesn't translate quite as well in English, but the whole idea of it is that you cannot just skip the processing bit. If something bad happens to you, if some bad luck happens, or you make a bad decision or wrong move, you need to feel it first. Like, allow yourself to fall apart for a bit. And for me as an ADHD, that's especially important because I have strong emotional reactions to things very quickly. And then I kind of go, I'm past that now. That's fine. 24 hours later, I'm like, oh yeah, it wasn't so bad. Whereas if I would try to move through that too quickly, I might make really bad decisions. So sit with it, and then you'll think of what to do.
I love that, because I think there's an equal importance on both. One is feel the feelings, process, and the other is and move on. And I think people struggle with both. Some just want to keep feeling the feelings and processing and replaying that story. Others just want to move on and not acknowledge. And actually both is important, is what I'm hearing. So I think that's great. What about the flip side? Some of the worst advice you've had in your life and why? And maybe it could be around a lot of the stuff we see online that is maybe well-intentioned, or I don't know, just people trying to make money out of us. I don't know, but just general life advice we see that maybe you've acknowledged hasn't been useful.
I thought about how, as I was growing up, right, in the 90s, I was encouraged to be a strong, independent woman, right? And I am a strong woman. My husband knows. I don't suffer fools gladly. But that sense of independence can also block a lot of women from seeking support, accepting help, asking for help, because we've been told that if you are not a strong, independent woman, you've somehow failed the previous generations of women. And that can really make it difficult if you're looking at striving for success in a company, or, you know, trying to do your parenting, whatever it is. We are not meant to parent in isolation or to run companies in isolation. These are ecosystems. You know, humans are tribal. Humans are social species. And the more I think of like independence as sort of every man is an island kind of thing, that really makes it difficult for us to do well in life, may it be in your private life or in your success in your work. So I've really thought about changing that independence to interdependence, that I can stand on my own 2 feet and I can also lean on the shoulders of others, or stand on the shoulders of others. That in psychology we do all the time. Lots of the things I've shared today were not necessarily my own ideas. I didn't come up with the nervous system regulation stuff. I just package it in a way that serves my clients in front of me. So we are always standing on the shoulders of giants, daring to take that support, daring to ask for the help that we needed. That's probably a really, really unhelpful piece of advice that's blocked me from accessing help for many years.
Wow, powerful. Because again, if you don't hear that nuance that you've shared, it sounds like great advice, right? And it's something that we can get on board with. And then actually what I'm hearing is you can then, you've felt the consequences of that and how it's not useful and it's actually holding you back. What about one of the biggest mistakes you have made in your life, and importantly, what it taught you?
I'm going to go with a different mistake than I'd actually thought about earlier, because it just comes to me now. And I think the biggest mistakes I've made in my life is trying to be perfect as a parent. I think I battled against parenthood a lot in my first few years. I had a very challenging, rough journey with parenting. My child had, extra difficulties. He didn't sleep for 4 years. He had severe life-threatening allergies, and I put so much pressure on myself to parent in a way that made that completely disregarded what my parental instinct was telling me to do, what I felt was intuitively right. So I guess the global theme is not trusting myself and my gut and my instinct. And that's, the biggest mistake I then feel I made that has impacted how I've, like, the relationship I've had with him. It's because I put too much pressure on myself and meant that I put too much pressure on him. And we're still repairing that today.
Okay, next one is the 3 truths question. So if you was to share 3 truths with the listeners that you would suggest are good kind of guides to live by. So the whole ethos of this podcast is to help people live happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives. So if you was to give 3 pieces of advice, 3 truths, 3 pieces of guidance that would mean that if we follow it, we're going to be on the right path to a happy, healthy, fulfilling life, what would you say?
So I think I have to touch on the happiness bit first. If we are constantly pursuing happiness, we will be unhappy. If we are constantly chasing this feeling of how I must feel this way, then we'll be unhappy. Whereas we accept life, good and bad, light and dark, paradoxically, you will feel more contented with the life that you have, inviting all the feelings in. So if you chase happiness, you will be unhappy. So that'll probably be my first one. My second one would be about how being compassionate to yourself and others is not fluffy or weak. It is a strong, courageous choice that involves setting boundaries, saying no, protecting your capacity, making wise decisions, and also actually really holding the heavy stuff that people bring to the table. So yeah, compassion is strong, not weak. Let's see if I can think of a third one. We talked about sort of the hustle, right? About how people, to be successful, they've been told they have to work hard and all of that. I think of it making peace with ease. Like, ease is not your enemy. Ease is the door gateway into your soothing system. Where can you do things with ease means that you can then step into your drive, right? So making peace with ease means that you allow yourself to take some shortcuts when it doesn't really matter that you do it perfectly. It means you can do things above and beyond and brilliantly, excellently where it matters, and just go, F it. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. And that, having that sort of letting go of the overthinking and the perfection, means that you will be less paralyzed and actually be able to do it. So yeah, make peace with ease.
Michaela, this has been absolutely blooming ace. Thank you so much. Just before we kind of head over to the Q&A, if people are listening right now and they want to get more of your content and stay up to date with what it is that you do, where do people need to go?
Well, head over to Pause, Purpose, Play, the podcast with me, Michaela. You can find it on thethomasconnection.co.uk, which is my website. You can find episodes on it on my Instagram, which is also the Thomas Connection. But yeah, you can find it on any platform because that's where I do all my musings, and I bring on guests as well. Hint, hint. I would love to interview Matt on the other side in the future and see if I can grill you with some deep questions as well. So yeah, that's where I hang out, mostly on Instagram and LinkedIn. And yeah, you can go and chat with me on my website as well.
Amazing. Okay, final question is, what is your personal definition of success?
Oh, heavy questions.
Yeah,
I think of it as, that's all right. I'm a psychologist. We like to go deep. This is why I can't do 10-second Instagram reels so well. I have to go on like an hour podcast. I think of it as like there's many different kinds of riches, right? What feels rich to me isn't just about monetary kind of financial reward, but it's also about having the reward that I can take an afternoon off and just go and be with my kids because I fancy it. That I am free enough from my work life that I can do those things where it matters, where I can spend the afternoon watching Bridgerton like I did this afternoon because I was tired to prepare for this interview. So that to me is rich. That to me is successful, that I have full freedom and flexibility in my work, and I wake up every morning and loving the work I do. I think that is the richest feeling in the world. That makes me feel very successful.
I'm just feeling emotional. I'm feeling all the feels. I just think what a beautiful message, what an important message, and what a super impactful conversation. Michaela, thank you so, so much. I really appreciate your time.